Martha Jenkins stared at the gleaming marble lobby of the Grandview Resort, watching her own family check in at the front desk. The irony wasn't lost on her. This was one of her hotels, part of the empire she'd built from nothing. The same people, who once made her sleep in the back seat of their old station wagon during family trips, were now paying premium rates to stay in her luxury accommodations. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Martha was 8 years old when she first realized her family saw her differently. It was the summer of 1987, and the Jenkins family was preparing for their annual vacation to Lake Tahoe. While her parents, Robert and Linda Jenkins, meticulously packed the trunk of their burgundy Ford Country Squire station wagon, Martha sat on the front porch steps of their modest ranch house in Bakersfield, California, watching her older siblings Kevin and Sarah argue over who got which suitcase. "Martha, honey, come here," her mother called, her voice carrying that particular tone Martha had learned to recognize, the one that meant she was about to be disappointed again. Linda Jenkins was a thin woman with perpetually worried eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving. She worked double shifts at the local diner to help make ends meet, and the stress showed in the premature lines around her mouth. Robert, Martha's father, was a mechanic at the Chevron station downtown. He was a quiet man who spoke more to car engines than to his youngest daughter. "We've run into a little problem with the hotel reservations," Linda continued, crouching down to Martha's eye level. "The place we booked only had rooms for 4 people, and with Kevin turning 16, he really needs his own space." Martha felt her stomach drop. She was the youngest by 6 years, an unexpected addition to a family that had already found its rhythm. Kevin was the golden child, star of the high school basketball team, and headed to community college in the Atadii fall. Sarah, at 14, was entering her rebellious phase and demanded privacy that their small house couldn't provide. "So where am I going to sleep?" Martha asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Robert looked up from arranging fishing gear in the trunk. "The wagon's got plenty of room in the back, kiddo. We'll fold down the seats and make you a real cozy spot. It'll be like camping." Martha had been camping exactly once, when her Girl Scout troop went to Sequoia National Park. She remembered mosquitoes, cold ground, and waking up with a crick in her neck that lasted for days. This didn't sound like an adventure. It sounded like punishment. But what if it gets cold? Or what if it rains? She pressed. "We'll park under cover," Linda said quickly. "And you'll have plenty of blankets. Besides, you're tough, aren't you? Tougher than your brother and sister." This was always the way they framed Martha's disadvantages, as character-building exercises that proved her superior resilience. When there wasn't enough money for her to join the school band like Kevin had, they told her she was more creative than kids who needed instruments to make music. When Sarah got new clothes for school and Martha got hand-me-downs from neighbors, they praised her for being less materialistic than other girls her age. The drive to Lake Tahoe took 6 hours. Martha spent most of it pressed against the window in the back seat, listening to Kevin complain about the music on the radio and Sarah paint her nails with polish that made the whole car smell like chemicals. Every time they stopped for gas or food, Martha hoped her parents might reconsider the sleeping arrangements. But when they pulled into the parking lot of the Pine Ridge Motel just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, her fate was sealed. The motel was nothing fancy, a 2-story building with rooms that opened directly onto the parking lot. Martha watched through the car window as her family checked in, Kevin getting his own key card like he was already an adult. The room they'd booked for her parents and Sarah was on the ground floor, with a clear view of where the station wagon was parked. "At least you'll be close," Linda said as she opened the back of the wagon and began arranging blankets and pillows. "If you need anything, just knock on the window." Martha climbed into her makeshift bed, still wearing her clothes from the day. The blankets smelled like the cedar chest where they'd been stored, and the pillow was flat and offered little comfort against the hard surface of the folded-down seats. Through the rear window, she could see the lit windows of the motel rooms, where other families were settling in for the night with cable TV and climate control. She tried to sleep, but every time a car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights swept across the interior of the wagon. The mountain air was colder than anyone had anticipated, and despite the blankets, Martha found herself shivering. Around midnight, a group of teenagers returned from somewhere, their voices carrying across the parking lot as they laughed and talked loudly about their evening. Martha pressed her face against the cold glass and watched them disappear into their rooms. She wondered what it would be like to be part of a family that made sure everyone had a proper place to sleep, that didn't see the youngest member as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be cared for. The next morning, Robert knocked on the car window at 7 a.m. sharp. "Rise and shine, kiddo. Time for breakfast." Martha's body ached from sleeping on the uneven surface, and her neck was stiff from using her arm as a pillow when the provided one had fallen to the floor sometime during the night. She climbed out of the wagon, trying to smooth down her rumpled clothes and hair. "How'd you sleep?" Linda asked, though she was already walking toward the motel lobby where continental breakfast was being served. "Fine," Martha lied, because she'd learned that complaining only made things worse. The breakfast room was small and crowded, filled with other families who had actual hotel rooms. Martha sat at a corner table with a paper plate of stale pastries and watery orange juice, watching Kevin flirt with a girl from Oregon whose family was staying in the room next to his. Sarah was absorbed in a teen magazine she'd bought at the gas station, occasionally showing pictures to their mother and discussing hairstyles. Martha felt invisible, like a ghost haunting her own family vacation. When they went to the lake later that morning, she sat alone on the shore while Kevin played volleyball with some college students, and Sarah sunbathed with her headphones on. Robert was absorbed in his fishing, and Linda was reading a paperback romance novel under an umbrella. The eye pattern continued for the entire week. Every night, Martha returned to the station wagon while her family retreated to their climate-controlled rooms. She learned to arrange the blankets in a way that provided slightly more comfort, and she discovered that if she positioned herself just right, she could see a sliver of the lake through the gap between two motel buildings. On the fourth night, a thunderstorm rolled through the mountains. The rain hammered against the car's roof with an intensity that made Martha think the windows might break. Lightning illuminated the parking lot in brief, stark flashes, and thunder shook the entire vehicle. Martha huddled under her blankets, wondering if her family would come check on her. They didn't. In the morning, Linda knocked on the fogged-up window and asked how she'd slept. When Martha mentioned the storm, her mother laughed and said, "Oh, you're so dramatic, honey. It was just a little rain." But Martha had counted every flash of lightning and every crack of thunder. She'd felt the car rock with the wind and listened to the rain find tiny leaks in the weather stripping, creating small puddles on the floor mats. It hadn't been just a little rain. It had been terrifying. That was the moment Martha began to understand something fundamental about her place in the world. She was expected to endure what others wouldn't, to be grateful for what others would consider unacceptable, and to minimize her own needs so that everyone else could be more comfortable. Phew. Vacation continued for 3 more days. Martha made the best of it, exploring the motel grounds early in the morning before anyone else was awake, befriending a stray cat that hung around the dumpsters, and inventing stories about the other families she observed from her unique vantage point in the parking lot. On their last night, she overheard her parents talking through the thin motel room wall. Robert was saying something about maybe getting a bigger hotel room next year, now that Kevin would be in college. Linda's response was quiet, but Martha caught the gist. They were already planning next summer's trip, and it sounded like Martha would once again be sleeping in whatever vehicle they drove. As she lay in the back of the station wagon that final night watching the stars through the rear window, Martha made herself a promise. Someday, she would have her own place to sleep wherever she went. Someday, She would never again have to depend on other people's kindness or tolerance for a roof over her head. She was 8 years old, and she had no idea how she would make that promise come true. But she knew, with the certainty that only children possess, that she would find a way. The drive home to Bakersfield was long and quiet. Kevin slept most of the way. Sarah listened to her Walkman, and their parents discussed work schedules and bills in low voices. Martha stared out the window at the passing landscape, already mentally preparing for another year of being the family's afterthought. When they pulled into their driveway, Martha helped unload the car without being asked. She carried her blankets and pillow to the laundry room, where they would be washed and put away until the next family vacation. As she walked past Kevin's room, she could hear him on the phone with friends, already making plans for the weekend. Sarah was in the bathroom, washing the chlorine from her hair and complaining loudly about how the hotel shampoo had made it feel weird. Linda was in the kitchen, going through mail that had accumulated while they were gone, and Robert was in the garage, checking something on the car. Martha went to her own small room, barely larger than a closet, really, with just enough space for a twin bed and a small dresser. She sat on the bed and looked around at her few possessions, some books from the library, a stuffed animal she'd had since she was a toddler, and a small collection of rocks she'd found in their backyard. This room, small as it was, belonged to her. No one could make her sleep somewhere else when she was here. But she also knew that this security was temporary and conditional. As long as she lived in this house, under her parents' roof, she would always be subject to their decisions about where she belonged. That night, as she fell asleep in her own bed for the first time in a week, Martha began to dream about the future. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Not the vague fairy tale dreams that most 8-year-olds have, but specific, concrete plans. She would study harder than anyone expected. She would find ways to make money. She would learn everything she could about how the world worked, so that someday, no one would ever again have the power to make her sleep in a car. High school changed everything for Martha Jenkins. By the time she turned 14, she had grown into a quiet, observant teenager who spent most of her free time at the Bakersfield Public Library. While her classmates hung out at the mall or went to parties, Martha was in the business section, reading books about entrepreneurship, real estate, and hotel management. The librarian, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, had noticed Martha's unusual reading habits. One afternoon in October 1993, she approached Martha's usual table in the corner of the reference section. "You've been checking out a lot of business books lately," Mrs. Patterson observed, settling into the chair across from Martha. "Are you working on a school project?" Martha looked up from Hotel Operations Management by David Hayes. "Not exactly. I'm just trying to learn how things work." "What kind of things?" Martha hesitated. She'd never told anyone about her plans before. "Hotels. I want to understand how they make money, how they decide what to charge, how they make people want to stay there." Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "That's quite ambitious for a 14-year-old. Any particular reason you're interested in the hospitality industry?" Martha closed the book and looked directly at the librarian. "Because I'm going to own hotels someday. A lot of them." There was something in Martha's voice, a quiet certainty that made Mrs. Patterson take her seriously. "Well then, you'll want to read this too." She handed Martha a copy of The Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, The Quest for Service Excellence. That book changed Martha's life. She learned about customer service standards, brand consistency, and the psychology of luxury hospitality. She discovered that successful hotels didn't just provide a place to sleep, they created experiences that made people feel valued and important. Martha began to see the world differently when her family went out to eat at Denny's on her mother's birthday. Martha noticed how long they waited to be seated, how the server seemed distracted, and how the coffee was lukewarm. She observed other customers' reactions, noting which ones seemed satisfied and which ones left disappointed. At home, she started keeping a notebook where she recorded her observations about customer service, pricing strategies, and business operations. She wrote about the grocery store where her mother shopped, noting which checkout lines moved fastest and why. She analyzed the gas station where her father worked, documenting how different approaches to customer interaction affected sales. Her family thought it was just another phase, like when she'd wanted to be a marine biologist after watching a documentary about dolphins. But Martha's interest in business wasn't fleeting, it was consuming. The summer after her sophomore year, Martha convinced her parents to let her get a job. While Kevin spent his college break hanging out with friends and Sarah worked part-time, at the movie theater mainly to meet boys, Martha applied for a position at the Hampton Inn on the outskirts of town. The hotel manager, James Rodriguez, was initially skeptical about hiring a 15-year-old for anything beyond basic housekeeping duties. But Martha had prepared for the interview like she was applying for a corporate position. She'd researched Hampton Inn's parent company, studied their brand standards, and even visited 3 different Hampton Inn locations to observe their operations. "Why do you want to work in a hotel?" Rodriguez asked during the interview. "Because hotels are in the business of making people feel at home when they're away from home," Martha replied. "That's a skill I want to learn." Rodriguez was impressed. Enough to hire her as a front desk assistant, working evening shifts 3 days a week. Martha's job involved checking guests in and out, answering phones, and handling basic customer service issues. But she treated it like an MBA program. She arrived early for every shift and stayed late to observe the night audit process. She asked questions about occupancy rates, revenue management, and booking patterns. She memorized the names and preferences of regular guests, learning to anticipate their needs before they expressed them. Within 3 months, Martha had been promoted to lead front desk associate. Within 6 months, she was training new employees. By the end of her first year, Rodriguez was asking for her input on operational improvements. "You've got something special, Martha," he told her one evening as they were reviewing the day's revenue reports. "Most people your age are focused on having fun. You're focused on building something." Martha was earning $7.25 an hour, but she was learning lessons worth far more than her paycheck. She discovered that successful hospitality was about attention to detail, consistency, and genuine care for customer experience. She learned about profit margins, cost control, and the importance of employee satisfaction in delivering quality service. At home, her newfound knowledge created an unexpected dynamic. When the Jenkins family went on their annual vacation, Martha still sleeping in whatever vehicle they were driving, she found herself mentally evaluating every aspect of their travel experience. During the summer of 1995, when Martha was 16, the family drove to San Diego for a week at the beach. They stayed at a budget motel near the boardwalk, the kind of place that charged by the night and had thin walls and questionable cleanliness standards. As Martha arranged her blankets in the back of their now aging station wagon, she calculated the cost of their accommodations. Her parents were paying $45 per night for a room that could barely accommodate 2 people comfortably. For 6 nights, that was $270. If they'd upgraded to a suite that could fit the entire family, it would have cost maybe $120 per night, or a $720 total, only $450 more than what they were already spending. But Martha realized the issue wasn't just financial. Her parents genuinely didn't see her sleeping in the car as a problem that needed solving. To them, she was being resourceful and uncomplaining. They praised her for being low maintenance and adaptable, never recognizing that these were code words for accepting less than she deserved. On the 3rd night of that San Diego trip, Martha was awakened by voices outside the car. A family with 3 children was standing in the parking lot, having what appeared to be an argument with the motel manager. Their room had flooded due to a plumbing problem, and the motel was fully booked. "We can put you up at our sister property about 10 miles inland," the manager was saying. "Or we can refund your money for tonight." 10 miles inland? The father protested. "We booked this place specifically because it's walking distance to the beach. My kids are 8, 10, and 12. We've been planning this trip for months." Martha watched through the car window as the family struggled with an impossible choice. They could accept a refund and spend hours trying to find alternative accommodations, or they could stay at a location that would completely change their vacation experience. Finally, the manager offered a solution. "Look, I can set you up in our conference room for tonight. It's not ideal, but there's a couch and some chairs, and you'd have access to a private bathroom. I'll only charge you half rate." The family accepted, grateful for any option that kept them near the beach. As Martha watched them carry their luggage toward the motel office, she had an epiphany. This family's problem, needing flexible, family-friendly accommodations in desirable locations, was the same problem her own family faced every year. But instead of sleeping in cars or accepting substandard solutions, what if there were hotels designed specifically for families who needed more space and flexibility? Martha began to envision a different kind of hospitality experience. Hotels, with suites designed for families of all sizes, with kitchenettes for people who couldn't afford to eat out for every meal, with amenities that made extended stays comfortable and affordable. She imagined properties in vacation destinations where families could actually relax instead of constantly compromising. The next day, while her family spent time at the beach, Martha walked along the hotel strip, observing different properties and their target markets. She noticed that most accommodations fell into two categories: expensive resorts that catered to wealthy couples, or budget motels that offered basic rooms with minimal amenities. There was a gap in the market for something in between: properties that offered the space and amenities families needed without the luxury pricing they couldn't afford. Martha began to sketch out ideas in the notebook she always carried, designing floor plans for family suites and calculating potential pricing models. When she returned to work at the Hampton Inn that fall, Martha approached James Rodriguez with a proposition. She wanted to conduct an informal survey of their guests to better understand what families valued most in their hotel experience. "What's this really about, Martha?" Rodriguez asked. "You're not just curious, you're planning something." Martha had been working for Rodriguez for over a year, and she trusted him more than anyone in her life. "I want to open my own hotels someday, but I want to understand what people actually need, not just what the industry thinks they want." Rodriguez smiled. "I figured it was something like that. You've never approached this job like it was temporary." With Rodriguez's permission, Martha began surveying guests during check-in and check-out. She asked about their biggest challenges when traveling with families, what amenities they wished were more widely available, and what would make them choose one hotel over another. The responses confirmed her hypothesis. Families wanted more space, kitchen facilities, and flexible room configurations. They valued cleanliness and safety over luxury amenities. They were willing to pay moderate prices for accommodations that met their practical needs. Martha compiled her survey results into a detailed report, complete with recommendations for service improvements and potential new product offerings. When she presented it to Rodriguez, he was genuinely impressed. "Martha, this is better market research than what our parent company pays consultants thousands of dollars to produce," he said. "Have you thought about studying business in college?" Martha had thought about college, but her family's financial situation made it seem impossible. Kevin had gone to community college for 2 years before dropping out to work full-time. Sarah had graduated high school but showed no interest in further education. Martha's parents assumed she would follow a similar path, maybe get an associate's degree in something practical, then settle into a stable job. But Martha had bigger plans. She'd been saving every penny from her Hampton Inn job, living at home and contributing minimally to household expenses. By the end of her junior year of high school, she had accumulated nearly $3,000, more money than she'd ever imagined having. She also had something more valuable than money. She had knowledge, experience, and a clear vision of what she wanted to accomplish. While her classmates were worried about prom dates and senior year parties, Martha was planning the next phase of her education and career. The transformation that had begun with sleeping in the back of a station wagon was accelerating. Martha was no longer the overlooked youngest child who accepted whatever circumstances were handed to her. She was becoming someone who identified problems and created solutions, someone who saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. As her 17th birthday approached, Martha knew that her real education was just beginning. The lessons she'd learned about resilience, observation, and determination were about to be put to the ultimate test. She was ready to leave Bakersfield behind and build the life she'd been planning since that cold night in the Lake Tahoe parking lot nearly a decade earlier. Martha Jenkins graduated from Bakersfield High School in May 1997 with a 3.8 GPA and a plan that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew her family's circumstances. While her classmates were celebrating the end of their academic careers or preparing for traditional four-year colleges they couldn't afford, Martha was about to execute the most ambitious strategy of her young life. She had been accepted to California State University Northridge with a partial academic scholarship. But instead of moving into a dorm like most freshmen, Martha had negotiated something unprecedented. She would commute from a studio apartment she'd rented near the campus, and she would work full-time at a Marriott Residence Inn that had just opened in the area. The apartment was tiny, barely 400 square feet, but it was hers. For the first time in her life, Martha had complete control over her living space. No one could make her sleep anywhere else. No one could decide her accommodations weren't important enough to consider, and no one could treat her comfort as optional. 3. Rent was $650 per month, which consumed most of her income from the Residence Inn, where she'd been hired as a night auditor. The position paid $12 per hour and required her to work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., checking in late arrivals, handling guest emergencies, and reconciling the day's financial transactions. Most people would have considered this schedule impossible to maintain while attending college full-time. Martha saw it as perfect. She could attend classes during the day, study in the afternoons, and work at night when the hotel was quiet enough for her to complete homework assignments between guest interactions. The Residence Inn was an extended stay, property designed for business travelers and families who needed accommodations for weeks or months, rather than just a few nights. Martha was fascinated by the business model: higher nightly rates than traditional hotels, but lower operational costs due to reduced housekeeping frequency and the fact that guests handled many services themselves. During her first semester, Martha excelled in her business courses while simultaneously learning advanced hotel operations. She discovered that night audit was the perfect position for someone who wanted to understand every aspect of hotel management. She handled reservations, managed guest complaints, coordinated with maintenance staff, and worked closely with the property's revenue management system. Her direct supervisor, Angela Morrison, was a 28-year-old assistant manager who had worked her way up from housekeeping over the course of 6 years. Angela became Martha's mentor, teaching her about profit and loss statements, occupancy optimization, and staff scheduling. "You're different from other college students I've worked with," Angela told Martha one night as they reviewed the previous week's performance metrics. "Most of them are just trying to earn beer money. You're studying this business like your life depends on it." "Because it does," Martha replied simply. By the spring of 1998, Martha had developed a comprehensive understanding of extended stay hospitality operations. She knew that the average guest stayed for 12 nights, that Tuesday through Thursday were the highest demand periods, and that the most profitable guests were corporate travelers whose companies had negotiated monthly rates. She also recognized that the Residence Inn's target market had significant overlap with the family travel market she'd been thinking about since high school. Extended stay guests needed the same things families needed: more space than traditional hotel rooms, kitchen facilities, and amenities that made longer stays comfortable. Martha began developing her thesis project around this intersection. For her senior capstone in business administration, she proposed to create a comprehensive business plan for a new type of hospitality property, something she called family extended stay suites. Her concept was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of traditional hotel rooms, the property would offer apartment-style suites with separate sleeping areas for parents and children, full kitchens, living rooms with dining space, and weekly rates that made extended vacations affordable for middle-income families. The target market would be families who wanted to spend a week or two in vacation destinations without paying resort prices or cramming into single hotel rooms. The properties would be located in secondary markets near popular destinations, close enough to attractions to be convenient, but far enough away to keep land costs manageable. Martha's professor, Dr. Richard Steinberg, was impressed by the thoroughness of her research and the sophistication of her financial projections. "This is graduate-level work, Martha. Have you considered pursuing an MBA?" Martha had considered it, but she had a different plan. "I think I can learn more by doing than by studying," she told him. "I want to start implementing this concept as soon as possible." During her final semester at Cal State Northridge, Martha began laying the groundwork for her business venture. She had saved approximately $15,000 from her work at the Residence Inn, but she knew that would barely cover the initial legal and administrative costs of starting a company, let alone acquiring property. She needed to understand real estate development, construction management, and commercial financing, skills that weren't covered in her undergraduate business program. So Martha devised another unconventional education strategy. She applied for a position with Blackstone Development Group, a mid-sized real estate development firm based in Los Angeles that specialized in hospitality properties. Instead of applying for an entry-level analyst position like most new graduates, Martha targeted a role in project management that would give her direct exposure to the entire development process. During her interview with Blackstone's Vice President of Development, Michael Chen, Martha presented her family extended stay suites concept as evidence of her understanding of market opportunities and her commitment to the hospitality industry. Martha made the strategic decision to pause expansion and focus on optimizing operations at existing properties. She implemented cost reduction measures while maintaining service quality, and she developed new marketing programs targeting local and regional markets that were less affected by the broader economic downturn. The financial crisis also created opportunities for Martha to acquire distressed properties at below-market prices. In late 2008, she negotiated the purchase of a partially completed hotel project in Napa Valley that had been abandoned by its original developer. The Napa Valley acquisition required Martha to take on additional debt at a time when most investors were avoiding risk, but she recognized that the property's location and development potential made it an exceptional long-term investment. By 2009, while many hospitality companies were contracting or filing for bankruptcy, Martha was completing construction on her 7th property and planning for the next phase of growth. She had not only survived the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, but she had positioned Harmony Family Suites for accelerated expansion when market conditions improved. Standing in the lobby of Harmony Family Suites Napa Valley, on opening day in March 2009, Martha reflected on how far she had come from that 8-year-old girl sleeping in a station wagon. She now owned and operated 7 luxury properties across 3 states, employed over 400 people, and had created a business that served thousands of families every year. But Martha knew this was still just the beginning. She had proven that her concept worked in multiple markets and economic conditions. Now she was ready to take Harmony Family Suites national, transforming family travel across the entire United States. In March 2010, Martha Jenkins received a phone call that would change everything. The caller was Rebecca Martinez, senior editor, at Travel Plus Leisure magazine, and she had an unusual request. "We're planning a feature story about innovative family travel accommodations," Martinez explained. "Your properties keep coming up in our research as examples of hospitality companies that are doing something genuinely different. Would you be interested in participating in a comprehensive profile?" Martha had avoided mainstream media attention, up to this point, preferring to focus on operations rather than publicity. But she recognized that national magazine coverage could accelerate Harmony Family Suites' growth in ways that traditional marketing couldn't achieve. The Travel Plus Leisure team spent 3 days visiting Martha's properties, interviewing guests, and documenting the unique features that set Harmony Family Suites apart from traditional hotels. The photographer captured families cooking breakfast in their suite kitchens, children playing in age-appropriate recreation areas, and parents relaxing in spaces designed for adult comfort while maintaining sightlines to where their kids were playing. When the article was published in the September 2010 issue, it generated a response that surprised everyone involved. The magazine received over 1,200 letters and emails from readers asking for more information about Harmony Family Suites locations and reservation procedures. More significantly, the article attracted attention from hospitality industry analysts and potential investors who had never heard of Martha's company. Within 2 weeks of publication, Martha received inquiries from private equity firms, hotel management companies, and individual investors interested in funding national expansion. But the most important response came from an unexpected source: families who had been struggling with the same accommodation challenges that had inspired Martha's original concept. Susan Chen, a mother of 3 from Portland, Oregon, wrote, "I read your article and literally cried. We've been taking family vacations for 8 years, and every trip involves compromises that make nobody happy. My teenagers end up sharing beds, my husband and I have no privacy, and we spend a fortune eating out because there's nowhere to prepare simple meals. What you've created sounds like exactly what our family needs." Martha received hundreds of similar letters from families across the country. Parents described cramming into single hotel rooms, teenagers sleeping on rollaway beds, and vacation budgets strained by restaurant costs for every meal. The letters confirmed that the market demand Martha had identified in California existed nationwide. Daniel Cooper, now Martha's chief operating officer, presented her with a comprehensive analysis of the response to the Travel Plus Leisure article. "We're getting reservation inquiries from 38 states, he reported. "People are willing to drive significant distances to stay at properties that meet their family's actual needs." The magazine coverage also attracted attention from hospitality industry conferences and trade publications. Martha was invited to speak at the International Hotel Investment Forum in Los Angeles, where she would present her business model to an audience of developers, investors, and hotel management executives. Her presentation, titled "Serving the House, Underserved Family Travel Market Opportunities," drew the largest audience of the 3-day conference. Martha explained how traditional hospitality companies had ignored family travelers by focusing on either business travelers or luxury leisure guests, leaving a massive market segment with inadequate accommodation options. She presented detailed, financial data showing that Harmony Family Suites properties consistently outperformed comparable hotels in occupancy rates, revenue per available room, and guest satisfaction scores. More importantly, she demonstrated that family-focused properties generated higher profit margins because guests stayed longer and spent more on ancillary services. The audience response was immediate and enthusiastic. After Martha's presentation, she was approached by representatives from Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt, all expressing interest in licensing her concept for their own extended stay brands. But the most significant conversation came from Thomas Brennan, a former Starwood Hotels executive who had recently launched an independent hotel development fund. Brennan had been following Martha's company since the Travel Plus Leisure article, and he had a proposition that could transform Harmony Family Suites from a regional operator into a national brand. "What you've built is remarkable," Brennan told Martha over dinner after the conference. But you're constrained by capital availability. With the right funding partner, you could have 50 properties within 5 years. Brennan's fund specialized in providing growth capital to innovative hospitality companies with proven concepts and strong management teams. He proposed a partnership that would provide $75 million in development capital while allowing Martha to maintain operational control and majority ownership of Harmony Family Suites. The partnership structure was more favorable than anything Martha had been offered previously. Brennan's fund would provide construction financing and development expertise, while Martha would retain responsibility for site selection, design standards, and operations management. Martha spent 3 months conducting due diligence on Brennan's fund and negotiating partnership terms. She consulted with hospitality industry attorneys, reviewed comparable partnership structures, and interviewed other hotel operators who had worked with institutional investors. The final agreement, signed in February 2011, established a joint venture that would develop 15 new Harmony Family Suites properties over 4 years. The partnership provided Martha with the capital resources to compete with major hotel chains while maintaining the entrepreneurial flexibility that had driven her success. Site selection for the first phase of national expansion required Martha to develop new market analysis capabilities. She hired Jennifer Walsh, a former Kimpton Hotels market research director, to lead a comprehensive study of family travel patterns and accommodation preferences across the United States. Walsh's research identified 23 metropolitan markets, where demographics, tourism infrastructure, and competitive dynamics created opportunities for Harmony Family Suites properties. The list included established family destinations like Orlando and Myrtle Beach, as well as emerging markets like Asheville, North Carolina, and Park City, Utah. Martha and Walsh spent 6 months visiting potential markets, analyzing local competition, and meeting with municipal development authorities. They developed standardized criteria for evaluating sites, including proximity to family attractions, accessibility from major highways, and availability of land suitable for their architectural requirements. The first property in the national expansion phase opened in Branson, Missouri, in September 2012. The 128-suite property was located 2 miles from the main entertainment district, offering families easy access to shows and attractions while providing quiet surroundings for rest and relaxation. Branson proved to be an ideal test market for Martha's national expansion strategy. The area attracted millions of family visitors annually, but existing accommodations were primarily limited to standard hotel rooms or expensive resort suites. Harmony Family Suites filled a clear market gap, achieving 89% occupancy during its first year of operation. More importantly, the Branson property validated Martha's operational systems for managing properties in markets where she couldn't provide daily oversight. The standardized training programs, quality control procedures, and customer service protocols she had developed proved effective when implemented by local management teams. Success in Branson accelerated the development timeline for additional properties. By the end of 2013, Martha had opened properties in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Outer Banks, North Carolina. Each new property reinforced the viability of her concept while generating valuable data about regional market preferences and operational requirements. The rapid expansion also attracted attention from hospitality industry analysts and business media. In March 2014, Forbes magazine published a profile of Martha titled "The Hotel Heiress Who Started with Nothing," which detailed her journey from sleeping in cars to operating a multi-million-dollar hospitality company. The Forbes article generated even more response than the original Travel Plus Leisure piece. Martha received speaking invitations from business schools, entrepreneurship conferences, and women's leadership organizations. She was featured on several podcast interviews and invited to participate in television segments about successful female entrepreneurs. But Martha remained focused on operations rather than celebrity. She spent most of her time visiting properties, training staff, and refining the systems that ensured consistent guest experiences across multiple locations. The most significant operational challenge came from maintaining quality standards while scaling rapidly. Each new property required local hiring, training, and management oversight. Martha developed comprehensive operations manuals, standardized staff training programs, and quality assurance protocols that could be implemented consistently regardless of location. She also created a guest feedback system that collected detailed satisfaction data from every family that stayed at Harmony Family Suites properties. The feedback revealed regional preferences and operational issues that might not be apparent to corporate management. For example, families in southeastern markets preferred larger kitchen facilities and outdoor grilling areas, while guests in mountain destinations valued fireplaces and hot tubs. Martha adapted her property designs to reflect these regional preferences while maintaining overall brand consistency. By early 2015, Harmony Family Suites operated 14 properties across 8 states, employed over 850 people, and generated annual revenue of $127 million. Martha had transformed her company from a regional hospitality operator into a nationally recognized brand. The success attracted acquisition interest from major hotel chains and private equity firms. In April 2015, Martha received a formal acquisition offer from Choice Hotels International for $340 million, representing a valuation of nearly 3.5 times annual revenue. The Choice Hotels offer would have made Martha financially secure beyond anything she had imagined. But it would also mean integrating Harmony Family Suites into a corporate structure that prioritized cost efficiency over customer experience innovation. Martha spent weeks considering the acquisition offer, consulting with her management team, investors, and industry advisors. The financial terms were attractive, but she remained concerned about maintaining the quality standards and entrepreneurial culture that had driven her success. Ultimately, Martha declined the Choice Hotels acquisition, choosing instead to pursue additional growth capital that would allow her to maintain control while accelerating expansion. She negotiated a $150 million credit facility with a consortium of commercial banks, providing sufficient capital to double her property portfolio over the following 3 years. The decision to remain independent proved prescient when the hospitality industry began experiencing consolidation pressures that often resulted in reduced service levels and standardized experiences that eliminated the unique features that made individual brands successful. By maintaining independence, Martha preserved the ability to innovate and adapt that had enabled Harmony Family Suites to serve family travelers better than larger competitors. She continued to refine her concept based on guest feedback and market research, introducing new amenities and services that enhanced the family travel experience. Standing in the lobby of her newest property in Myrtle Beach in December 2015, Martha reflected on how dramatically her life had changed over the previous 5 years. She now operated properties in 10 states, employed over 200 people, and served thousands of families who had been underserved by traditional hospitality companies. But more than the business success, Martha was proud that she had created something that genuinely improved people's lives. Every week, she received letters from families thanking her for providing accommodations that allowed them to travel together comfortably and affordably. The 8-year-old girl who had once slept in the back of a station wagon had built a hospitality empire dedicated to ensuring that no family would ever have to compromise their comfort or accept inadequate accommodations again. And she was just getting started. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October 2018. Martha was in her corporate office in San Luis Obispo, reviewing architectural plans for 3 new properties scheduled to open the following year, when her assistant informed her that someone named Kevin Jenkins was on the line. Martha hadn't spoken to her older brother in over 3 years. Their relationship had become increasingly strained as Martha's success grew, and her family's expectations of financial assistance became more demanding. Kevin had dropped out of college, worked various jobs without much success, and had recently been laid off from his position at an auto parts store. Hey, Martha? Kevin's voice carried the forced casualness that she remembered from their childhood. Hope you're doing well. Listen, I know it's been a while since we talked, but I wanted to reach out about something. Martha leaned back in her executive chair, overlooking the Pacific Ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office. What can I do for you, Kevin? Well, Linda and I are planning a family trip to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. We're thinking about taking the kids to Disney World, maybe spend a week in Florida. I heard you have some hotels down there now? Martha did indeed have properties in Florida. 3 Harmony Family Suites locations that had opened over the past 2 years in Orlando, Tampa, and Fort Lauderdale. They were among her most successful properties, consistently booked at capacity during peak seasons. I have 3 properties in Florida, Martha confirmed. Are you looking for a reservation? Kevin's voice became more tentative. Actually, I was hoping we might be able to work something out. You know, family discount or something? Money's been pretty tight since I lost my job, but Linda's been planning this trip for months. Martha felt a familiar mixture of emotions. The old impulse to help the family combined with years of accumulated resentment about their treatment of her. She thought about all the times her needs had been considered optional, all the nights she'd slept in cars while her siblings enjoyed comfortable accommodations. Let me check availability, Martha said. When are you planning to travel? As Kevin provided his travel dates, Martha pulled up the reservation system for her Orlando property. The dates he'd requested fell during spring break season, when her suites typically commanded premium rates of $380 per night. I can offer you a 2-bedroom suite at our Orlando location, Martha said. Our spring break rate is $380 per night, plus taxes and fees. There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Kevin spoke, his voice strained. That's more than we were hoping to spend. I thought maybe, since we're family. Martha had been expecting this conversation for years. She'd prepared for the moment when her family would ask for special treatment, based on relationships they'd never prioritized when she needed support. Kevin, let me ask you something, Martha said, her voice calm but direct. Do you remember our family vacations when we were kids? Sure, those were fun times. We went to Lake Tahoe, San Diego, all over California. Do you remember where I slept during those trips? Another pause. Well, you slept in the car sometimes, but that was different. We were trying to save money, and you were the youngest. I slept in the car every single trip, Martha interrupted. For 10 years. While you and Sarah got hotel rooms, I slept in the back of whatever vehicle we were driving. In parking lots, in thunderstorms, in freezing mountain air. Kevin's voice became defensive. Martha, that was a long time ago. We were just kids. Our parents made those decisions. You're right. You were kids. But you're not kids now. And our parents aren't making your travel decisions anymore. Martha opened her calendar and saw that she had a conference call starting in 15 minutes with her development team about potential expansion into the Pacific Northwest. Kevin, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you the same accommodation arrangement I had during our family vacations. You can sleep in your car in my hotel parking lot for free. The silence stretched longer this time. When Kevin finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of anger. That's not fair, Martha. We're family. I thought you'd help us out. Family, Martha repeated. Where was the family when I was building this company? When I was working 16-hour days and sleeping on construction sites? When I was risking everything I'd saved to start my first property? We didn't know you needed help. You never asked. Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. I shouldn't have had to ask. That's what family is supposed to be about. Caring. Enough to notice when someone needs support. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Kevin alternating between guilt-tripping and pleading. Martha remained polite but firm. She would not provide special discounts or free accommodations based on family relationships that had been absent when she needed them most. After ending the call, Martha sat quietly in her office, looking out at the ocean. She didn't feel satisfaction from the conversation. She felt sadness that her family relationships had deteriorated to this point. But she also felt clarity about the boundaries she needed to maintain. 2 weeks later, Martha received a similar call from her sister Sarah. Sarah's approach was different. She started with congratulations about Martha's success and compliments about the business articles she'd seen, before transitioning into a request for help with a family vacation to Hawaii. "I've been following your company in the news," Sarah said. "It's amazing what you've built. I'm so proud to have such a successful sister." Martha had learned to recognize performative praise. "Thank you, Sarah. What can I do for you?" Sarah's request was more elaborate than Kevin's had been. She wanted Martha to arrange complimentary accommodations for her family at partner resorts in Hawaii, along with recommendations for activities and restaurants. She presented it as an opportunity for Martha to help family experience the kind of luxury travel they'd never been able to afford. Martha's response was similar to what she'd told Kevin. "Sarah, I don't have properties in Hawaii, and I don't provide complimentary accommodations to family members. If you'd like help planning a trip you can afford, I'm happy to offer recommendations." Sarah's reaction was more dramatic than Kevin's had been. "I can't believe you're being so cold to your own family. We're not asking for much, just some help with a vacation. You have more money than you could ever spend." "It's not about money," Martha explained. "It's about respect. Growing up, my comfort and needs were consistently treated as optional. Now you want me to prioritize your vacation plans above my business principles. That's completely different. We were kids then. You can't hold childhood stuff against us forever." Martha felt the familiar frustration of trying to explain something that should have been obvious. "Sarah, it's not about holding grudges. It's about recognizing patterns. When I needed support, it wasn't available. Now that you need something from me, you expect unconditional generosity." The conversation ended badly, with Sarah accusing Martha of letting success go to her head and forgetting where she came from. But Martha knew exactly where she'd come from. She remembered every night sleeping in cars, every time her needs had been dismissed, every moment she'd felt invisible in her own family. Those experiences had shaped her determination to build something better, not just for herself, but for other families who deserved better treatment. The most difficult conversation came 6 months later, when her parents called. Robert and Linda Jenkins were both in their 70s now, living on Social Security and the small pension from Robert's years as a mechanic. They'd heard about Martha's success through Kevin and Sarah, and they had their own requests. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished, honey," Linda said, her voice carrying the same tone Martha remembered from childhood, a mixture of affection and expectation. "Your father and I have been talking, and we'd love to visit some of your hotels. We've never stayed anywhere really nice." Robert took the phone. "We were thinking maybe we could visit different properties, like a tour of what you've built. We could help you see how they're running, give you feedback from a customer perspective." Martha almost smiled at the suggestion that her parents, who had never worked in hospitality or business, could provide useful operational feedback about her properties. But she recognized the underlying request. They wanted free luxury vacations funded by the daughter they'd never properly supported. "I'd be happy to arrange paid reservations for you at any of my properties," Martha said. "We offer senior discounts, and I can recommend properties in areas you might enjoy visiting." "Paid reservations?" Linda's voice carried disappointment. "Martha, we're your parents. We sacrificed a lot to raise you kids. I worked double shifts at that diner for years to help support the family. And I appreciate the work you did," Martha replied. "But providing for your children's basic needs isn't a sacrifice that creates lifelong debt. It's a parent's responsibility." The conversation became heated when Martha's parents suggested that her success obligated her to give back to the family that had made her who she was. They seemed genuinely unable to understand that their treatment of Martha during her childhood had been problematic, viewing it instead as character-building adversity that deserved credit for her eventual success. Martha tried to explain that sleeping in cars during family vacations hadn't built her character. It had taught her that her comfort didn't matter to the people who were supposed to care about her most. Her success came from her determination to ensure that other families would never experience what she had endured. The phone call ended with her parents expressing disappointment and confusion about Martha's ingratitude and selfishness. They seemed unable to recognize the irony that they were asking for luxury accommodations from the daughter they'd once made to sleep in parking lots. After these conversations with her family members, Martha felt a complex mixture of emotions. She wasn't happy about the deteriorated relationships, but she was clear about her boundaries. She had built her business to serve families who deserved better treatment, and that mission included refusing to reward the family members who had treated her poorly. The vindication came not from denying her family's requests, but from the success she'd built despite their lack of support. Every night, hundreds of families stayed in Harmony Family Suites properties where every member was treated with equal consideration and respect. Children had their own spaces, parents had privacy and comfort, and nobody had to compromise their basic needs for others' convenience. By 2019, Martha operated 28 properties across 15 states. Harmony Family Suites had become the leading brand in family-focused extended stay accommodations, with industry-leading guest satisfaction scores and financial performance. The company employed over 2,200 people and had served more than $400,000 families since opening its first property. Martha's personal net worth had grown to over $180 million, making her one of the most successful hospitality entrepreneurs in the United States. She owned homes in California, Colorado, and Hawaii, traveled internationally several times per year, and lived with a level of comfort and security that would have been unimaginable during her childhood. But the most satisfying aspect of her success wasn't the personal wealth or recognition. It was the knowledge that she had identified a problem that affected millions of families and created a solution that genuinely improved their lives. Every week, Martha received letters from families describing how Harmony Family Suites had enhanced their vacation experiences. Parents wrote about being able to relax while their children played safely nearby. Teenagers expressed appreciation for having their own spaces. Grandparents described multi-generational trips that were comfortable for everyone involved. These letters reminded Martha why she had built her business and why she maintained such high standards for guest experience. The 8-year-old girl who had once felt invisible and unimportant had created a hospitality empire dedicated to ensuring that every family member felt valued and cared for. Standing in the lobby of her newest property in Asheville, North Carolina, on a busy Saturday morning in June 2019, Martha watched families check in for their vacations. She observed parents discussing room arrangements with front desk staff who were trained to find solutions that worked for everyone. She saw children excited about amenities designed specifically for their enjoyment. She noticed grandparents settling into comfortable seating areas where they could supervise grandchildren while relaxing themselves. This was what Martha had envisioned during all those nights sleeping in cars. Accommodations where every family member mattered, where nobody had to sacrifice their comfort for others' convenience, where parents could afford to travel without forcing anyone to accept substandard conditions. Her family members still occasionally reached out with requests for free accommodations or financial assistance. Martha remained polite but firm in her responses. She had built something remarkable, and she would not compromise her standards or her principles for people who had never supported her when she needed them most. The girl who had once been forced to sleep in cars now owned an empire of hotels where that would never happen to any child. That was vindication enough. Martha Jenkins stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in the Beverly Hills Hotel, looking out at an audience of 800 hospitality industry leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs. It was March 2022, and she was receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the industry's highest honor. At 45, Martha was the youngest person ever to receive this recognition, but her impact on the hospitality industry had been transformative. Harmony Family Suites now operated 62 properties across 23 states, had revolutionized family travel accommodations, and had inspired dozens of competitors to develop their own family-focused concepts. As Martha began her acceptance speech, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 37 years ago, I was an 8-year-old girl sleeping in the back of a station wagon in a Lake Tahoe parking lot. Tonight, I'm receiving recognition for building a hospitality company that ensures no family ever has to make those kinds of compromises again. The audience was silent, captivated by the stark contrast between Martha's humble beginnings and her extraordinary success. She continued, "That experience taught me something crucial about hospitality. It's not about providing the most luxurious amenities or the highest thread count sheets. It's about ensuring that every guest feels valued, respected, and cared for." Martha's speech outlined the evolution of Harmony Family Suites from a single property serving an underserved market to a national brand that had fundamentally changed how the industry thought about family travel. She emphasized that success hadn't come from following conventional wisdom, but from listening to customers whose needs weren't being met by existing options. "We succeeded because we solved a real problem," Martha explained. "Millions of families were being forced to choose between unaffordable luxury resorts and inadequate budget accommodations. We created a third option, properties that provided the space, amenities, and services families actually needed at prices they could afford." The applause was sustained and genuine. Martha had not only built a successful business, but had created a new category within the hospitality industry that other companies were now rushing to emulate. After the ceremony, Martha was approached by dozens of industry colleagues, investors, and entrepreneurs who wanted to discuss potential partnerships, acquisition opportunities, and expansion strategies. But the conversation that mattered most came from an unexpected source. "Ms. Jenkins, my name is Amanda Rodriguez. I'm 12 years old, and my family stayed at your hotel in San Diego last month." Martha knelt down to Amanda's eye level, recognizing the girl's parents standing nearby with proud smiles. "Hi, Amanda. Did you enjoy your stay with us?" "It was the best vacation ever," Amanda said enthusiastically. "My little brother got his own bed, and I had my own room, and my parents could make breakfast in the kitchen. We've never had a vacation where everybody was happy before." Amanda's mother stepped forward. "We've been following your story online, and we wanted Amanda to meet you. She's been telling everyone at school about the hotel lady who makes sure families can travel together comfortably." Martha felt tears in her eyes as she realized that Amanda would grow up never experiencing the kind of family travel compromises that had shaped Martha's childhood. "Amanda, what do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to help families like you do," Amanda replied without hesitation. "Maybe I'll build hotels too, or maybe I'll do something else. But I want to make sure nobody has to sleep where they don't want to sleep." This interaction crystallized for Martha the broader significance of what she had accomplished. She hadn't just built a successful business. She had changed cultural expectations about how families should be treated when they travel. Children, like Amanda, would grow up assuming that their comfort and needs mattered equally to their parents and siblings. The transformation had extended beyond Martha's own company. Major hotel chains had launched their own family-focused brands, incorporating design elements and service standards that Harmony Family Suites had pioneered. The entire industry had been forced to reconsider how they served family travelers. Martha's influence had also extended into philanthropy and social advocacy. In 2020, she had established the Family First Foundation, which provided travel grants to families with limited financial resources, funding vacations for children with serious illnesses, and supporting single parents who couldn't otherwise afford quality family time away from home. The foundation's work had touched thousands of lives, Martha regularly received letters from families describing how foundation-funded trips had created precious memories during difficult times. Parents wrote about being able to focus on their children instead of worrying about inadequate accommodations or financial strain. One letter particularly moved Martha. It came from Teresa Martinez, a single mother of 3 whose husband had died in a construction accident. The Family First Foundation had funded a week-long stay at Harmony Family Suites Orlando for Teresa's family during a particularly difficult period following her husband's death. My children were struggling with their father's death, and I felt like I was failing them, Teresa wrote. The week we spent at your hotel gave us time to be together without the stresses of daily life. My kids played and laughed for the first time in months. I was able to cook their favorite meals and maintain some sense of normalcy while we were healing. That trip saved our family. Martha kept Teresa's letter in her office, along with hundreds of similar messages from families whose lives had been positively affected by her work. These letters reminded her daily that business success was meaningful only when it served a larger purpose. By 2023, Martha's business empire had expanded beyond hotels. She had launched a family travel planning service, developed partnerships with family-friendly attractions and restaurants, and created a line of family travel products designed to make trips more comfortable and enjoyable for parents and children. Harmony Family Suites had become more than a hotel chain. It had become a brand that represented a philosophy about how families should travel together. The company's marketing emphasized that every family member deserved comfort, respect, and consideration, regardless of age or family position. Martha's success had also enabled her to purchase the original Pine Ridge Motel in Lake Tahoe, where she had slept in the station wagon as a child. She renovated the property into a Harmony Family Suites location, with a plaque in the lobby commemorating the experience that had inspired her life's work. The Lake Tahoe property held special significance for Martha. She visited several times each year, often walking through the parking lot where she had once spent cold, uncomfortable nights. The space that had once been filled with cars now featured a children's playground and family recreation area. Martha had also purchased the house in Bakersfield where she grew up. Instead of demolishing it or selling it for development, she donated the property to a local nonprofit that provided temporary housing for families experiencing homelessness. The bedrooms where her siblings had slept now served families who needed safe, comfortable places to stay while rebuilding their lives. The decision to donate her childhood home reflected Martha's philosophy about using success to address the kinds of problems she had experienced personally. She understood what it felt like to have inadequate shelter and to feel like her comfort didn't matter to the people responsible for caring for her. Martha's relationship with her original family remained distant but cordial. Kevin, Sarah, and her parents occasionally reached out with congratulations about business milestones or requests for assistance with various projects. Martha maintained polite boundaries, offering appropriate help when genuinely needed while declining attempts to exploit their family connection for personal benefit. The most significant development in Martha's personal life came in 2021 when she married David Chen, an architect who had worked on several Harmony Family Suites properties. David understood Martha's commitment to her business and shared her passion for creating spaces where families could thrive together. Their wedding was held at the original Harmony Family Suites property in Pismo Beach, with many of Martha's employees attending alongside friends and business associates. The ceremony emphasized family, not just the one Martha and David were creating together, but the extended family of employees, guests, and supporters who had been part of Martha's journey. Martha and David purchased a home in Carmel, California, with space for the children they hoped to have together. The house was designed with multiple bedrooms, family gathering areas, and amenities that would ensure every family member would always have comfortable, appropriate accommodation. I want our children to grow up knowing that their comfort and happiness matter as much as anyone else's, Martha told David as they planned their future family. They'll never have to compromise their basic needs or accept less than they deserve. As Martha approached her 50th birthday in 2025, she began planning the next phase of her career and legacy. Harmony Family Suites was financially secure and operationally excellent, generating over $400 million in annual revenue while maintaining industry-leading guest satisfaction scores. Martha had begun developing succession plans that would ensure the company's mission and standards would continue even after she was no longer actively involved in daily operations. She wanted to guarantee that future generations of families would benefit from the customer-focused approach she had pioneered. She was also exploring opportunities to expand internationally, bringing the Harmony Family Suites concept to family travelers in Europe, Asia, and other regions where accommodation options for families remained limited. The fundamental need that Martha had identified, families deserving comfortable, affordable places to stay together, existed everywhere. Martha's story had become a case study taught in business schools across the country. Students analyzed her market identification strategies, her operational innovations, and her approach to scaling a customer-focused business. But the most important lesson wasn't about business techniques, it was about the power of personal experience to drive meaningful innovation. Professor Jennifer Walsh, now teaching at Stanford Business School after her years working with Martha, often told her students, "Martha Jenkins succeeded because she solved a problem she had lived through personally. She didn't create a business based on market research or industry trends. She created a solution to a problem that had affected her deeply, and it turned out millions of other families had experienced the same problem." Martha's influence extended beyond the hospitality industry. She had become a sought-after speaker at conferences about entrepreneurship, leadership, and social responsibility. Her presentations emphasized that the most successful businesses were often those that addressed fundamental human needs that had been overlooked by established companies. "Don't look for complicated problems to solve," Martha would tell audiences of aspiring entrepreneurs. "Look for simple problems that affect millions of people, but haven't been addressed because they seem too basic or obvious. Those are often the biggest opportunities." As Martha sat in her office in early 2025, reviewing plans for 5 new properties scheduled to open that year, she reflected on the distance she had traveled from that 8-year-old girl sleeping in a station wagon. She had built more than a business. She had created a legacy that would improve family experiences for generations to come. The transformation was complete. The child who had been treated as an afterthought had become a leader who ensured that every family member was treated with equal consideration and respect. The girl who had slept in parking lots now owned properties where that would never happen to any child. Martha Jenkins had achieved the ultimate victory, not revenge against those who had treated her poorly, but the creation of something that prevented others from experiencing what she had endured. She had turned her pain into purpose, her disadvantage into a business advantage, and her childhood suffering into a legacy of family happiness. The girl who had been forced to sleep in cars had built an empire dedicated to ensuring that every family could travel with dignity, comfort, and joy. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.